Between the year 1900 and 1964, over 800 people were hanged in the UK. But some of these long-standing convictions could have been a miscarriage of justice.
They got no evidence. They're just trying to haul anybody in for it.
Barristers Sasha Wass and Jeremy Dean have been investigating these life-changing cases as they teamed up with a living relative, desperate to clear their family name.
Myself and my family have always believed our great-grandfather was innocent.
Together, they investigated the convictions.
There's a stench about this. Probably wouldn't even be admissible in the modern time.
He has the opportunity to kill her, he has the weapons to kill her, and we know that they've had contact beforehand.
And reassessed the evidence using modern forensic techniques.
The findings on it are really quite instructive. There was no blood inside the hammer.
Before they submitted their findings to a Crown Court judge, who determined whether the conviction was safe or could have been a miscarriage of justice.
I'm here today to consider, with the help of learned counsel, the safety of the conviction.
Now, as we reunite the barristers and the family members for the first time, we'll be finding out exactly what happened next.
I've got the new evidence, I think, that you were both looking for.
Was justice finally served? And are the unexplained cases finally closed? Today, Jeremy and Sasha are reopening the casebook on a crime that shook Britain. A murder in an idyllic location and a conviction which led to the execution of one man, Herbert Bennett.
The most interesting thing about this case was piecing together all of the circumstantial evidence, which was independent.
For me, what was fascinating was to be able to look at the evidence through the window of modern-day forensic techniques.
I mean, the big question is whether it actually made any difference to the overall result.
Well, I remain very troubled about this case.
Well, we're going to meet the family member later, but before we do, let's just remind ourselves about the facts of this intriguing case.
Her estranged husband, Herbert John Bennett, immediately came under suspicion and was arrested for her murder. Unable to provide a convincing alibi, it took a jury at the Old Bailey just 45 minutes to find Bennett guilty, the judge passing a sentence of death. On Thursday, the 21st of March, 1901, despite fiercely protesting his innocence, Herbert John Bennett was hanged at Norwich Jail.
I, Herbert John Bennett, consider that I have been tried on suspicion and not on evidence.
Over a century later, Paul Fitchett, the closest living relative of Herbert and Mary Bennett, believes there are unanswered questions surrounding the case.
Herbert Bennett is my great-grandfather and Mary was my great-grandmother.
So who is the man behind the mystery? In 1897, aged just 17, Herbert married his piano teacher Mary Jane Clark, 2 years his senior. Their daughter Ruby was born 2 years later.
It's a tragic case. Whenever I think about Herbert and Mary, it's always my mind goes to Grandma, to Granny, to Ruby herself. She was made an orphan.
Desperate to know the truth, Paul has delved into his past, giving him an insight to his great-grandparents' relationship.
And you begin to form little personalities about the people that they may have been. I think they were both a couple of scallywags, to be honest.
Herbert and Mary's relationship was marked by shady behaviour, a pair of con artists who orchestrated numerous scams.
It's possible that that's what they were doing, ripping people off. I think the driving force was Mary.
By June 1900, the relationship had soured, and the couple were living apart.
We know that they had separated by the time that she went up to Great Yarmouth.
It was here, 3 months after the split, that Mary was brutally murdered. The big question is, did Herbert follow her to the coast to kill her?
Myself and my family have always believed our great-grandfather was innocent. I just hope we might be able to prove that that is the case.
Helping Paul investigate his great-grandfather's case are two of the country's leading legal minds. Jeremy Dean QC is a top defence barrister with over 30 years' experience of serious crime. Reviewing the case for the prosecution is Sasha Was QC, who has successfully convicted some of the country's most notorious offenders.
Hello, Paul. Nice to meet you.
Before they begin their investigation, they have a word of warning for Paul.
You, of course, are a descendant of both the victim and the person who's been convicted.
Yep.
Can I just ask you this? If the judge determines that this was a safe conviction, would you be able to cope with that?
We'd very much like it to go for him, but we're realistic.
I just need to stress to you, Paul, that we can't simply revisit old ground. That's not the way it works.
OK.
So the target point here is to find something in the evidence which is a new angle that can be put before the judge, and hopefully we can uncover that.
We will update you when we have some news.
Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
The barristers will re-examine the legal case while searching for crucial new evidence that could cast doubt on the safety of the conviction.
Jeremy, look at this.
They'll then present their findings to a Crown Court judge, who could recommend the case for review or uphold the original guilty verdict. The first task is to identify the key facts of the murder.
So, Jeremy, we know that on the morning of the 23rd of September 1900, the body of Mary Bennett was found on Great Yarmouth Beach. She had been strangled with a single mohair bootlace. The first person to come under suspicion was her estranged husband, Herbert, and Herbert Bennett was in fact seen in Great Yarmouth at the time of her murder.
Evidence that he was in the area is open to question. From the moment Herbert Bennett was arrested, witnesses were paid by the media in advance of giving evidence, so sold their stories, and their reliability has to be looked at by us.
At the heart of the prosecution's case were witnesses placing Herbert in Yarmouth and a key piece of evidence, a photo.
Mary was in the habit of wearing a gold chain, and in fact you can see it on this photograph taken 3 days before her murder. She's there with her little girl, Ruby. When the defendant's lodgings were searched, they found the gold chain. We have a woman who was estranged from her husband, and when police searched his lodgings, he was found in possession of items of jewellery which she was wearing within days of her murder. All in all, Jeremy, this looks like a pretty strong case against Herbert Bennett.
Jeremy has a difficult task ahead if he's to convince a judge that this case was a miscarriage of justice. In Great Yarmouth, the setting of this mysterious murder, Paul has met up with his daughter Rebecca. He wants to see for himself where his great-grandmother was murdered.
So here we are. Her actual body was found in a set of dunes similar to these, but really in the position right underneath where that roller coaster sits now. She was found lying in the sand. Her legs were drawn up and her clothes were in disarray. There were witnesses that said that she'd been seen with a man, but nobody could identify the guy because obviously it was at night.
Okay.
They knew there was a man crouching by her or over her at the time.
Local gossip led officers to a nearby boarding house called Mrs. Rudrum's, where the victim had been staying.
The only thing that notified the Rudrums that she didn't come home that night was the sound of Ruby crying the following day.
The Rudrums lived at 104 of Yarmouth's historic rows, narrow alleyways of medieval houses tightly packed together that formed the social heart of Yarmouth in 1900. The police arrived to escort landlord John Rudrum to the mortuary, where he confirmed the dead woman as his lodger. The problem was, she was staying under a false name, Mrs. Hood.
When they found out that this was Mrs. Hood, the police went to the Rudrums and searched her room. On the mantelpiece, they found a photograph of her on the beach with Ruby.
So why was Mary in Great Yarmouth with Ruby using a false name? Did Herbert know they were there? The barristers are analysing events in the week leading up to the murder for clues.
Mary arrived at Mrs. Rodram's boarding house on Saturday, the 15th of September, a week before her murder, using the alias Hood. During the week preceding her death, she went out with a man she referred to on a number of occasions as her brother-in-law. On Friday the 21st, the night before she died, Alice Rodram, the eldest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Rodram, overheard Mary talking to a man and hears them kiss loudly. And we know that that can't have been Herbert Bennett because there was evidence that he was at work in Woolwich at that time. On the 22nd, the day of her killing, she headed out dressed up and met this brother-in-law under a clock. And then at about 9 p.m, Alice Rodram saw her meeting a man by the town hall. What's clear is there was at least one other man, if not more, hobnobbing with Mary Bennett in the days leading up to her killing. And that's obviously very, very important in a backdrop of a situation where we don't even know why she was in Yarmouth. A really murky picture.
7 weeks after her murder, the police finally uncovered Mary's true identity, tracing her to Bexley Heath via a laundry label found in an item of clothing. Herbert quickly came under suspicion and was arrested on the 6th of November. He told police that on the night of the murder, he was drinking in a pub in Woolwich with 2 friends. But his friends failed to corroborate his alibi. He had the wrong weekend. It seems Herbert was regularly a stranger to the truth. He had been to Great Yarmouth, and more than once, as the police would soon discover. For now, they had their prime suspect in custody. So did he have a motive?
They were a married couple who were estranged. There was evidence that their relationship was tempestuous, and he was engaged to be married to someone else while his wife was still living.
Upon his arrest, Herbert had asked that his new fiancée, a parlourmaid called Alice Meadows, be informed. Did Herbert want rid of his wife to marry his new love?
The prosecution were entitled to suggest that there was an identifiable motive to kill her, to separate himself from a woman he was already separated from. But it doesn't really make sense.
Motive was by no means the central plank of their case. And in fact, you can take out the proposed motive altogether and still have a fairly strong circumstantial case against Herbert Bennett.
Alice Meadows arrived at Woolwich Police Station to discover that her new fiancé was a married man. But she too had a revelation. Several weeks before the murder, the couple had visited Great Yarmouth, staying at the Crown and Anchor Hotel. News of Herbert's arrest quickly spread through the press, who began a campaign to convict him, portraying Mary as the innocent victim, strangled by her deceitful husband. Paul has returned to Great Yarmouth to search the local archive. He wants to see for himself how powerful the story was.
The tragedy on South Beach, suspected case of murder, a mysterious affair, then goes on to reveal the facts as they knew it at the time. This was my great-grandmother. Sorry. Talking about my grandmother, my great-grandmother. What strikes me in this is the level of detail that they go to. Everything's here in the paper. Anybody could come forward with quite a detailed witness account and not actually have even been there. You could make yourself a witness in this murder. How would anybody be an unbiased juror? Herbert had been tried in the paper before they'd even got to court. He did not have a very fair trial. At all. Couldn't have had.
The case against Herbert relied heavily upon the testimony of key witnesses from Great Yarmouth. But how reliable were they?
Herbert Bennett always denied that he was in Great Yarmouth on the weekend of the 22nd of September. However, he had been staying at the Crown and Anchor on 2 previous weekends, not very long beforehand. As far as the weekend of the murder is concerned, 5 separate witnesses place Herbert Bennett in Yarmouth. So all of these witnesses present a pattern of Herbert Bennett's presence in Great Yarmouth and his movements in Great Yarmouth.
We know that this is a case where there were huge problems with the media, and the judge himself had described the press's coverage of the case as a disgrace and a scandal. And that has to be the backdrop to historic consideration of the safety of the conviction in this case.
Jeremy and Sasha are re-examining the details of the murder itself. Does the murder weapon offer any clues?
Sasha, Mary's body was found on the beach. She'd been strangled with a mohair shoelace tied around her neck. 1 knot at the back of the head and 1 on the left front side.
It's very curious, isn't it? Because a mohair shoelace would not be the first choice of weapon if you were planning a murder. There is evidence that the shoelace had actually broken at some stage, and doesn't suggest to me that this was necessarily a premeditated murder.
Sasha has just taken delivery of a significant treasured item that could be far more enlightening. To obtain physical evidence that can be re-examined from a case over a century old is extremely rare.
Jeremy, look at this. These are the original exhibits from the trial. This is the actual necklace that was found in Mr. Bennett's home address. It was said at the trial to be the exact necklace that Mary was wearing. You remember this photograph was taken 3 days before her death. So, of course, it was a critical piece of evidence, because if that is right, it would appear that the necklace was taken off her whilst she was at Great Yarmouth, which again would point to Bennett being the murderer.
The barristers have asked forensic experts Harry Smyth and Maria McLennan to analyse the photograph using modern techniques. Will they be able to say definitely whether the chain worn by Mary in the photograph is the same chain found in Herbert's possession?
We have a very, very small photograph here, which is almost impossible to see for those of us who don't have fantastic eyesight, but you've managed to enlarge it quite considerably.
We've blown it up to about 75%. So if we then blur out some of the background material so we can focus more on Mary herself and then lighten the area.
At the time of the trial, magnifying glasses were used. How much improved would you say the procedure is today?
I could give you both magnifying glasses to look at the image now, and you may see different things. This way, we don't have the same degree of difference as we would, say, looking at a picture through a magnifying glass.
So, Maria, you are really an expert in jewellery.
Yes.
So what we would like from you is an opinion about whether this necklace can be matched with the item of jewellery worn by Mary on a photograph taken before her death.
At the trial, there was much contention between whether the design that we see in the photo was that of a chain or that of a rope design. The design we have here is a chain. We can see the individual links. However, I think it's entirely possible for either design to be photographed in a way that it can be interpreted as one or the other. Even today, with our more modern procedures, we can't use jewellery as a reliable, foolproof piece of evidence.
So does it concern you that the jury were told by one of the experts at the trial that the chain here was what can be seen in the photograph?
It was speculation and it was opinion at best, I think.
Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Paul has returned to London for an update on the investigation. He has no idea what valuable evidence the barristers have been able to obtain.
This is the original photograph And even with glasses, I can't see the chain. So wait for this. This is Mary's chain.
Oh, Lord.
I know. This was the chain that was the exhibit in the case. And this was the chain that the prosecution witness said with certainty was the chain that Mary was wearing, all right? This was the chain that was found in Herbert's lodgings in Woolwich.
Can I touch? Can I?
Well, put gloves on because it's very precious. If we hold it up, just so it can... I know, it's very, very lovely.
That's gorgeous.
I know, it is. I know.
After all this time.
There you are. But it's lovely, isn't it?
It is. A crucial piece of evidence.
Absolutely. Now, let me put it here. Feel free to touch it as long as you've got the gloves on. All right?
And this is the original front. That is so tiny. And there's my grandma. That's amazing.
We've spoken to some experts in jewellery and photography, and I want Jeremy to tell you the results.
What's emerged is some very important information. The forensic jewellery experts said that it wasn't possible to say with any confidence that this necklace is the one that Mary is wearing on the photograph. It went further than that because, in her view, it was wrong and dangerous for the prosecution to suggest that the jury could be sure. And if the prosecution wrongly tried to convince the jury that it was the same necklace, then that may be an avenue for opening up the case again.
Yes, that's fantastic.
There are fundamental questions about the safety of the conviction, and at the moment, I feel positive, yes.
None of the new evidence has caused me to feel uncomfortable about the safety of these convictions, but I would like to look at the trial papers, and in particular, I'd like to look at the judge's summing up.
Buoyed by the revelation of potential new evidence, Paul has one last important visit to make. He's arrived with his daughter Rebecca at Norwich Prison, where Herbert was hanged. The prison chaplain has difficult information to show them.
Now, I can tell you that he was prisoner number 1622. Herbert was the second person to be executed, and here we have the record.
Goodness gracious me.
And he would have immediately been buried.
Straight away?
Straight away, all very
removed him from the scaffolding and taken him out
scaffold,
and out to the burial plot.
Put in the coffin and taken straight away. Stand on this side, please. There's a cross at the top, and it says 12 men were executed in this prison between July 1898 and 1951. Their bodies are buried here.
Are they one on top of the other?
No.
Or just, so it's 12, 1, 2, 3. Unlocked.
I'll leave them in peace.
I would find that hard. It's just horrible.
I found that tremendously moving. And it just makes me even more determined to get my great-grandfather exonerated.
Judgment Day has arrived. Jeremy and Sasha will soon make their submissions before His Honour Judge David Radford. For Paul, this could be the start of a legal process to clear his great-grandfather's name, or the judge could uphold the original conviction. Judge Radford has over 40 years of experience at the criminal bar and sat at the Court of Appeal. For this programme, he'll be treating this matter as he would any other case.
We are here this afternoon to consider whether the conviction of Mr. Bennett for murdering his wife in 1900 is, in my view, a safe or an unsafe conviction. Mr. Dean?
It's my submission that this was a weak, questionable and highly circumstantial case, bedevilled by press sensational reporting. The kingpin of the prosecution case was the finding of a necklace at Mr. Bennett's address in Woolwich. At trial, the prosecution placed very heavy reliance on the proposition that the necklace that was found at Mr. Bennett's address in Woolwich was the necklace worn by Mrs. Bennett on the beach. However, in the course of this inquiry, we've had the benefit of very great assistance from two modern-day experts. Based on the original exhibits, the evidence of the two experts casts very serious doubt on the safety of Mr. Bennett's conviction. One simply cannot say that the necklace recovered from Mr. Bennett's lodgings was the one worn in the beach photograph. And in the circumstances, Your Honour should regard Mr. Bennett's conviction as unsafe and declare that it ought to be reconsidered.
Yes, Miss Ross.
Your Honour, the Crown say that this was a compelling circumstantial case. There is very clear evidence that Mr. Bennett was in Great Yarmouth at the time that his wife was murdered. He was seen in her company. He was seen without her within a very short period of time of her having been killed. In terms of the publicity and the intervention of the newspapers, no witness gave evidence that they would not have otherwise given. The necklace evidence remains important. William Clark gave evidence. He identified the necklace that had been taken from Mr. Bennett's lodgings in Woolwich, and he positively identified the necklace as being the necklace that his mother had asked him to give to his daughter Mary. And that provides strong support that the necklace that was worn on the beach photograph was more likely than not to have been the necklace that was found amongst the defendant's property when he was arrested sometime later.
Yes, well, I'm grateful to both of you for your submissions. I now wish to consider them before I reach my own conclusions. Thank you.
Sasha has highlighted that a strong case remains against Herbert. Paul is getting increasingly concerned about how things are developing.
I wanted to say so much in there. I really wanted to say so much. I wasn't given the opportunity to.
What Jeremy has done, Paul, is exactly the right thing, because there's no point in Jeremy saying to the judge, we don't like the verdict, we'd like another trial.
We could offer an alternative.
Well, in fairness to Jeremy, he put forward the strongest arguments that there were, and I think we've just got to try and wait patiently until the judge comes up with a decision, and we don't know what that's going to be.
No.
Jeremy has presented the only new evidence uncovered by the investigation. But will it be enough to question the guilty verdict? The judge has reached his decision.
This new evidence, which Mr. Dean relies on from the photographic experts, may that have rendered unsafe the jury's verdict, given the very strong cogency, in my opinion, of the other evidence that the prosecution were able to rely on, properly guided by no less than the Lord Chief Justice. I have concluded that there was nothing unsafe, in my view, about the verdict. I will now rise.
Today, even after reviewing the facts of the case, Jeremy is still struggling with the judge's opinion.
Well, Sasha, I think that was a harsh decision. In my view, the new evidence about the necklace was more than enough to make the judge feel uncomfortable with the verdict. And I'm disappointed that he felt able to say that there was nothing in this case that made him feel uneasy.
I think the point is, Jeremy, that the necklace evidence was neutralised rather than undermined, and there remained a strong body of circumstantial evidence. I'm not remotely surprised by the the decision in
Well,
this.
you take a different view. We'll have to agree to differ on this one.
Paul has travelled to London to meet the barristers. This is the first time they have met each other since the judgment.
I'm really desperate to go and see the barristers again because I want to know how they feel that the judge came to his decision. And I've got so much more information now to be able to share with them. I really want to get their advice to see how we can move this along.
Paul, nice to see you.
Hello, nice to see you.
Come and
Take a
sit
seat.
down.
Thank you. Tell us, Paul, how you feel about Judge Radford's judgment.
I don't agree with Judge Radford's judgment. There's too much focus, as far as I was concerned, onto the two pieces of evidence.
You've got a strong sense of unfinished
Absolutely.
business.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working quite hard since I saw you last, and I have other information that I'd
Well,
like to share
tell
with
us what's been happening since we last met.
My partner Anna and I focused on some of the witness testimony about a brother-in-law, because Mary kept on referring to a brother-in-law, about 3, 4, 5 times during the trial, but it wasn't picked up on by the defence counsel. And we have actually found that Herbert did have a brother. His name was Henry, and we found him. So I think I've got a pretty strong new evidence, to put it in a different way.
After the judge's verdict, Paul returned to Great Yarmouth to follow up on a new lead, something he is convinced was overlooked in the original trial.
One of the things that really interests me about this case that was never really explained at trial was the number of references that Mary made at the time of her murder about her brother-in-law. And one of those references that she made was to the landlady, Mrs. Rudrum, who Mary was staying with here at the Rose. And Mrs. Rudrum...
If this is the same Henry James Bennett, Mary repeatedly makes references to a seafaring man.
So is it possible that in fact it was Henry, not Herbert, that Mary was with at the time of the murder?
The witnesses could have mistaken Herbert for Henry.
Back in Great Yarmouth. Well, that's enough to put quite a lot of doubt in this case.
Definitely. Definitely.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Well, Paul, that's really interesting. I mean, it's obvious that you have great passion about Herbert Bennett's case, and you've done a huge amount of work.
That's very true, yeah. It's ongoing at the moment. But yes, I think I've got the new evidence that you were both looking for.
Essentially, Paul, your suggestion is that Henry is an alternative suspect in this case.
Well, not necessarily a suspect. I'm not saying that I believe that Henry was guilty of Mary's murder. I'm not putting in that light, but what I'm saying is that we can now establish that there may have been somebody else in Great Yarmouth at the time of the murder. We know that Mary was seen with other men.
With them being just 2 years apart in age, Paul believes that some of the witnesses could have seen his younger brother and not Herbert.
Obviously, the appearance of Henry would be critical if you were to advance your hypothesis. Have you got any photographs of Henry to show us?
Not yet.
Not
That-
yet,
This
all
is,
right.
this is on my to-do
I
list.
understand.
But Henry is 2 years younger than Herbert.
Yes.
It's a reasonable inference that 19 and 21-year-old siblings might have some resemblance to each other.
They might, but we've all come across families where siblings look completely different
That is
from
an
each
argument.
other. I think it's dangerous to imagine that there's going to be a comparison in the absence of any evidence to support that.
In the absence of any evidence, I agree with you, but you have to bear in mind, of course, that during that period of time, men dressed very, very similarly in the style of clothing that they were wearing.
Yes, but
And had similar hairstyles.
And had similar hairstyles.
Let's remember, people were able to identify each other. They
Yeah.
didn't all look identical. The other thing I'm slightly concerned about is the evidence of Henry James Bennett being a sailor.
Yes.
The date of birth of your great-great-uncle, Henry James Bennett, appears to be from the birth certificate, the 2nd of September 1881. Yeah. The naval records indicate that the Henry James Bennett they were dealing with had a date of birth, the 18th of January 1881. So the two men with a name which is identical, although not that unusual, I suspect, have got different dates of birth.
In all probability, if we consider this to be my great-great-uncle, Henry James Bennett, serving as a sailor.
The same people.
The same people. He's lied about his date of birth.
Right.
In order to be able to join the Navy. My father did exactly the same thing when he joined up.
Finally, Paul, this.
Yeah.
We know from your investigations that a census conducted in 1901 on the 31st of March indicated that Henry James Bennett, your great-great-uncle, was at home with his family in Kent.
Yes.
What this naval record indicates is that between the 23rd of March and the end of October, Henry appears to have been away at sea on the Vulcan.
He's assigned to the Vulcan, yes.
Yes.
If this, even if this isn't, if I've got the wrong Henry James Bennett, we still got a brother-in-law.
Well,
that's my point. We've got a brother-in-law.
To be fair to Paul, we're still driven back to the fact that during the trial there was evidence that Mary made frequent reference to being in the company of a brother-in-law, and at that point was never properly, fully or comprehensively canvassed during the trial. So the sailing aspect is in fact a subsidiary issue. The difficulty that still has to be addressed is that if the defence failed to follow up this point in the course of the trial, that doesn't necessarily come under the umbrella of new evidence. Because the mere fact that it wasn't focused upon in the trial may not be enough.
But during his research, Paul also discovered another murder with startling similarities. Could this help crack the mystery?
And it's in this article here from the Yarmouth Mercury, and it's the case of a young lady by the name of Dora May Gray. The locale of the crime and the manner in which it was perpetrated by means of a shoelace taken from one of the victim's shoes and tied tightly round the neck, together with a pair of stockings, recalled the Bennett murder almost 12 years ago. It's very significant because it's a crime of very, very similar circumstances. And it undermines the conviction of Herbert 12 years earlier.
Paul and Anna have visited the location where Dora May Gray's body was found, on the same beach where Mary's body was discovered.
It was round about in this area that Dora May Gray was found. In similar circumstances, she was found on her back in the sand, exactly the same as Mary. I'm really convinced that when you put these little pieces of evidence together, that Herbert's conviction shouldn't have stood. So much convinces me that he was innocent.
The other aspect that you've raised is this similar murder that took place 12 years later on Great Yarmouth Beach.
This is correct. These cases are so similar, it strikes me that it's an argument to say that the murderer of Mary is the same person who murdered Dora May Gray, which obviously can't be Herbert because Herbert was hanged.
Of course, we know that Herbert's case received enormous publicity.
It did.
How confident can you be that Dora May Gray was not a copycat killing?
It could well be a copycat killing, but at the moment we just don't know. But again, it's another question.
We're not shutting any doors. We don't want to. And
No,
we can see the passion with which you've approached this case. But it would be wrong for us to say that this is enough.
No, OK, that's fair enough.
The question I want to ask you is it case closed?
Absolutely not, no, Jeremy. One of the things I wanted to ask you both was for some advice as to what I do next.
I think the answer is to see if you can find some iota of evidence to link Henry to Great Yarmouth, to the killing, a photograph, if you could find one which shows that Henry and Herbert resembled each other very, very closely.
I'm working on that.
That might just be enough to get the whole thing up and running.
Yeah. I'm going to take this as far as I possibly can. I want to see my great-grandfather exonerated of this murder.
All right, well, Good luck.
Thank you very
And
much.
we both wish you the best of
I'll
luck.
keep you informed as
Absolutely.
to how I get on.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy with what Jeremy and Sasha said to me today. There was some good, positive feedback there. It's galvanised me enough to be able to move the case forward and get the new evidence that is so desperately needed for this case.
Paul is not giving up, that is for sure. I admire his relentlessness and his determination. He obviously believes strongly in what he's doing.
I agree with that. What worries me is that I fear that he is never going to find the piece of evidence that he's looking for.
That may be, Sasha, but people like him who go on and on and on sometimes hit the jackpot. We'll just have to see.
We will.